Thank you everyone for joining today. I'm here with Canon, who's been a wonderful affiliate of Avenue 2 for a number of years now. And we're going to be talking today about some of his experiences that he's had in England, as well as some of the fabulous hotels that he's experienced in London. So we'll start off just by, Canon, can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and being an advisor, how long you've been doing it, and what brought you down this path?
I've been doing this for well over 30, maybe 35 years, primarily in the beginning as a corporate agent, but as the last 10 years doing all leisure except for one old client from McKinsey & Company.
35 years later, never looking back. So, Canon, you had a very cool opportunity to have an experience in England at Highclere Castle. Can you tell us a little bit about just the castle itself, where it is, and what took you there?
Well, most of us know Highclere Castle as Downton Abbey, and a dear friend in Washington 2 years ago told me of this experience of going to Downton Abbey, aka Highclere Castle, and I thought, well, I need to do this as well. So a good friend and a fellow traveler, Elizabeth Montgomery, and another old friend of ours, John Prather, booked ourselves to London for 4 days, spend 2 nights in London to see the holiday decorations and a few hotels and whatnot, and then headed out by train to Newbury, to the wonderful little Relais Chateau called The Vineyard, owned by a Brit, and actually a lovely hotel with an odd name, I think, in the middle of Great Britain, but he was inspired by a vineyard he owns in Napa Valley, hence The Vineyard. Some wonderful Hollywood sketches in the hallway, an old building incorporated into a new building, and just minutes from Highclere. Lord Carnarvon and his wife, Fiona, the last few years have had this dinner, and we sort of called the castle, having no luck online trying to find information. And I was indeed told they were thinking of doing it, but they had no idea when. So when they knew, they would call us. And mid-August arrived, and I got a call from this lovely lady at the castle saying, "Would you like to come?" So off we went. Unfortunately, no photographs were allowed in the castle. You arrived at night, went down this wonderful lane, just like Cora and Lord Grantham and Lady Mary do on TV. And we arrived at the castle, were greeted, walked in, started enjoying some champagne, and then Countess Fiona and her husband, Lord Carnarvon, arrived, and the evening began with some canapes and champagne, then a walking tour of the ground level, dinner, and in between all of this was a trip into the basement to see the artifacts and things sort of left over from his great-great-grandfather's experience with Stanley Carter opening up King Tut's tomb. And that was sort of it in a nutshell. We saw the new carpet in the library and queried what we thought of it. Not that it made too much difference, but and Countess Carnarvon and her husband were with us the entire evening. This was not a little cameo appearance. Thank you for coming. They were with us, escorted us through the house, gave us history, gave us great stories, and then joined us for dinner, and then afterwards for pedophores and things in the library. So it was 4 hours, start to finish, and it was a very quick 4 hours, but a very enjoyable one.
How many people were at the dinner?
There were about 45 to 50 people. There were tables of about 10 guests apiece. And we were not one of my party was lucky enough to sit with Lord Carnarvon. We did not, but we had a very interesting gang of people, so it was a lot of fun.
And this is something that's not advertised. You just know about it, type of thing, and you have
pretty much so. And clearly, if you wanted to go with a gang of people, they would open up the house and do an event for you.
So when, just in general, when visiting Highclere Castle, I know from a traveler standpoint, in my own experience, trying to make that experience happen for my own clients, it's open very sporadically for touring during the rest of the year, and not open for touring during some months. Is that your understanding?
That's absolutely correct. If you were part of a group, you could probably go anytime, but it is open sporadically, and certainly open more in the nice weather months than December. But December, they do have special holiday events and an evening dinner like they did this time. And now after COVID, who knows? I don't know whether they continue to do it, but it was certainly a special event. And to see the Egyptian artifacts in the basement was very interesting as well.
That's very special. I'm sure those get viewed by I'm not even sure if those are part of their regular tour, actually.
I would say not, because you're really knocking around in the basement, and the ceiling is not high, and you're in very close quarters. So I would say absolutely. I would guess not, but again, I don't know. But it's well located in that it's about an hour or so by train from London. It's 45 minutes to Blenheim and Woodstock. You go in another direction, you go west, you're maybe a little farther, an hour or so from Bath, Salisbury, Stourhead, all sorts of wonderful little architectural gems, and how the cities that are on people's sort of bucket list once they've sort of done London.
And the hotel you stayed at, the Vineyard, would you say that's more for friends or couples traveling, or is it kind of family friendly or not, but a good base? As you mentioned, it's in fairly close proximity to some of the other major sites sort of in that part of England.
It's certainly a lovely property. I would say it's very multi-purposed and multi-generational. They have a great spa. They have obviously an incredible wine cellar because of his property in Napa. So it's not all European wines. It's certainly a lot of American wines as well. A very good kitchen. And certainly, in the nice weather months, there are activities outside, which of course we were not taking part of in mid-December. But no, I would say it would be a great location and a great jumping off point to do a number of things, although it is a bit remote. I would certainly encourage you to spend some time in Bath. And of course, Woodstock is pretty special considering Blenheim is at its back door. And we had lunch at Feathers, the small boutique property that a lot of people use in Woodstock.
It's great to have that option to use that as a base rather than try and do the day trip from London that goes to Bath and goes to Stonehenge and is a 16-hour day that we all actively try and discourage our clients from doing, just because it is such a long day. So to have a little gem of a hotel out there to suggest even doing 2 nights is really wonderful. So you spent 2 nights there, had this fabulous dinner, and you were also in London. And where did you stay when you were in the city?
In London, I stayed at one of my favorite hotels, the Stafford, which has a great American connection to American journalists and World War II people. And it too sort of has a basement like Highclere, where there's places to explore and where people used to shelter in place during bombing raids of London. But the Stafford is great. It's also very close to Spencer House, where you have to make a special appointment to see the interior. But Spencer House was the in-town residence of Princess of Wales, Diana's family.
Very, very well located within the city itself. Is there a particular room category or something very unique about the hotel other than its World War II connection that you are so passionate about?
Well, it's got a nice selection of rooms. You've got the old part of the hotel, which is quirky, with a few steps up and a few steps down in the hallway. Then you've got the wing in the back, which is maybe a bit more up to date and modern for some travelers who want sort of very slick accommodations and not more sort of quirky ones. But no, it's very charming. And actually, one night we were there, it was sort of warm enough that people were still outside with heat lamps, sort of under canopies, having drinks in the evening. And then when you went out sort of the back alley, if you will, you fall into one of my favorite restaurants, Chutney Mary's. So if you like Indian food, it's all there.
Absolutely love the Stafford. You also visited a couple of other hotels there. Could you tell us a little bit about a few of the others that you inspected?
I can. One, of course, that I love is the Shangri-La on the other side of the river. Extremely contemporary, high in the sky. I'm not sure that Prince Charles likes those buildings, but the Shard is pretty remarkable, and the attention to detail at the Shangri-La was remarkable, with the curtains that just sort of hid themselves in the ceiling as you arrived in your room. The special Asian sort of touches with Toto toilets that do remarkable things. You need an instruction manual to operate. And when I was there as well, one of the people in the lobby who I had thought sort of had moved on to another world, I heard this voice, and it was none other than Robin Leach of The Rich and the Famous. And then the St. James Club, which is not far from the Stafford, very much the same thing, once a private club and now a very small, intimate a boutique property, and around the corner from another great eatery, the Woolsey. And I suppose the Woolsey will lead me to the former location of the American Embassy, and you've got the Beaumont. And there is one of London's new gems built by the owners of the Woolsey restaurant. And then I also saw, just as it was opening, was the new Belmont property, the Cadogan, which was really great. Again, another sort of gem in or will be a new gem in London. I tend to identify with smaller properties because to me they have a better vibe and are more interesting than large ones.
Better sense of place.
The Shangri-La was large, it had an identity.
Yeah.
With or without Robin Leach.
And with those, hotels, London obviously has so many options, but with just the ones that you visited or stayed at, would you recommend all of them for couples or friends, or is there one you would recommend more if you were traveling with, adult children, or what type of client would you recommend for each of them?
Well, I think I would recommend most of these for certainly couples traveling together, friends traveling together. Most of them would be certainly nice for children, but probably, for instance, I think the Shangri-La might have more activities for children simply because it's a larger hotel. And it might be more interesting for children to have that wonderful view, bird's eye view of London, seeing it from all four sides.
Did you find that obviously the St. James, for example, and the Stafford are quite central to many of the sites that most visitors to London are going to for the first time? The Shangri-La at the Shard is a little bit further away. Everything's connected, but it's a little further away. Did you find that the distance to that property when you stayed there was an annoyance, or was it absolutely fine because of the tube connections and there was no issue getting around town?
I rather liked it because I'd stayed in another hotel as well that time. And so it was, sort of the yin and yang of London. But it was very great because even though it's this large building, sort of controversial building, though very interesting building in London, there were restaurants within just a short 5 or 10 minute walk that were very intimate and something that you would be very happy to go to and to recommend to clients. So no, it didn't bother me at all. And in fact, some years ago, I was on a Silver Sea cruise that was docked fairly close to the London Bridge. So no, I think that's a part of London that's sort of coming alive, and it's near the oh God, what's it called? The
The
market,
market.
the market, and Globe Theatre and the Tate Modern. And if you like Tate Modern, well, perfect, because it's a short walk just down by the river.
So if you were designing this a trip to London, and let's assume that your clients had not been to the city before, they're huge Downton Abbey fans, how long would you suggest they spend between the city and spending out near Highclere and touring some of the other filming locations that are sort of out in that general area?
Well, I think I'd probably say 7 days. And if you have more time, maybe more like 10. I know people's schedules are busy, and particularly with children, you can only take them out of school so long. So you could certainly do perhaps 4 days in London and 3 days out there, or maybe 5 days in London and 2 days out there, because you really don't need all that much time unless you're really going to take in Woodstock, Blenheim, Bath, and then Salisbury. And then if that's the case, you do need to allow more time, because there are a lot of gardens and a lot of certainly historic house museums that are worth your time and while to see.
It's so wonderful to have that sort of background and that own experience, because most clients, even if they're coming in on a cruise ship, may only want to spend a couple of nights in London and don't really realize how much is very close to the city, within an hour or 2 hours, that is so worthwhile to visit, and having those extra few nights to really see that the part of the English countryside and that part of life is so special. So it's wonderful to be able to encourage.
And with the huge new interest, or maybe not so new, but interest in Jane Austen. And of course, Jane Austen and Bath have a close relationship.
One last piece I just wanted to ask you, Canon, before we say goodbye, was if there was one piece, whether it was in London or outside of London, one experience, one castle, one restaurant, what is your ultimate must-do, must-see in this part of the world?
What a terrible question. Too many.
I know. Too many. Well, you can give me one of each if you'd like. If it's a restaurant and something to see, well, we can do that too.
I think one of my favorite restaurants, and I'm sure this is true of a lot of people, is the Wolsey. It's in an old building on Piccadilly just next to the Ritz, with wonderful wrought iron cages and things where clerks and things would have sat and met with clients. But it still has that wonderful vibe, except in the 21st century. And it's one of those places, if you like to eavesdrop and like to imagine who's sitting next to you, you can, because they probably are somebody. And even if they're not, you can make up all sorts of stories about who you had dinner with. But in addition, the food is fabulous. What would I say my favorite hotel is? Certainly the Stafford ranks right on the top if you want something big and want something modern. As I've mentioned, certainly try the Shard and the Shangri-La. The view is remarkable. Another great one and a new one is the Corinthia. And look for the heart in the chandelier in the lobby and tell me if you see it. And then a new one, which has been, not a new one, but a newly renovated one that I love too in Covent Gardens is One Aldwych. And if
you and I are hotel like kindred spirits. You've just named probably my top three in London too.
And if you're a swimmer, the one thing I will always remember about the One Aldwych is there's music piped into the water under the water. So you can be happy swimming to, I don't know what, maybe the Beatles or...
maybe they let you choose if you're the only one in the pool, I don't know.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Canon. This has been so fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat about your experience and your love of London and of the UK, which is so very clear. We'll end on that one and look forward to chatting about one of your adventures.
Let's do this again.
Okay. Sounds great. I can't wait.
Okay.